Okay, I'm going to jump straight into it because I haven't got very long. So we're Together Co. We create connections that change lives. We're a loneliness charity in Brighton and Hove, and we work with people who are lonely or isolated. We do befriending, social prescribing, volunteering, and we kind of share our knowledge and expertise through consultancy and through collaboration work like this. In a normal year, we have around about 400 volunteers and around about 1,000 people that we support each year, which is mostly with weekly contact or with weekly support, and then around about 16,000 hours of volunteer time in 1920, which was the last full year, right, Kellen? So changes in demand since COVID. So in the 10 weeks, middle of March to middle of May, we had more referrals than in the whole of 2019 put together. In 1 week, we had an 800% increase comparative to the average number of inquiries than the previous year. And just in terms of, sort of hard numbers, we would normally in befriending get about 5 inquiries or 5 referrals a week, and we were getting 40 to 50 a week. And these were all referrals of people who had been sent to us or had been referred to us by people who knew that they definitely needed what we were offering. Rather than speculative inquiries. But we also had a brilliant community response. So we also had a massive increase in the numbers of volunteers who were coming forward, and we had a great fundraising quarter as well in terms of people doing community fundraising for us around our COVID response. This is the most common response when I say we had an 800% increase in demand, followed swiftly by how the heck do you cope with that, or words to that effect. I mean, sort of at the time, we just sort of did what we felt we needed to do. So, but looking back, I think that the things I would say was that, well, you move fast, you act with the best information that you have at that point in time, and you have to kind of be okay with the fact that that information will be imperfect and incomplete. And my governance head says, write down what you decide and why, and make sure you've documented that. So should you need to go back and say, well, look, this is why we did what we did, you do have that kind of trail. We knew that our services that we delivered normally would need to be adjusted to be continued, but we also knew that we would be able to offer more based on the kind of infrastructure that we have. We've been doing befriending and other similar work in the city for over 20 years, so we have really well established systems, networks, really great relationships in the city. And we also sort of from the very beginning realised that we would need to think about digital and how that was going to be part of it. So we reached out to our people, by which I mean our clients, our service users, our volunteers, obviously staff in the first instance were still kind of physically in the same place. Everybody had different worries, concerns, problems, challenges. Obviously the huge uncertainty was a given across the board. And it became pretty clear quite early that we would need a bit of a mixture of methods, that kind of blending of the traditional kind of approach with more digital stuff, different digital approaches. We actually phoned all of our befriending scheme members and all of our current social prescribing client base, and we wrote to those who we hadn't been able to get through to, or for whom the conversation hadn't been able to happen kind of thoroughly. So people with hearing issues, for example, it's very hard often to communicate on the phone. In terms of staff and working from home, we one Friday we were like, right, okay, Monday we're going to have to start doing everything face to face. We'll shift to phone only. And actually on that Monday I was like, okay, crap, this is really much more, it's more than this. Everyone's going to be working from home by the end of the week. So we basically went from being pretty much 95% office based to being 100% home based within about 3 or 4 days. So we shifted to Slack and Zoom and so on. Some of those I think people found easier to cope with than others. We started using Google Docs to a larger extent because our VPN, our remote access to our server, really didn't cope. It had been designed for 6 people working remotely from time to time rather than 30 people working remotely all the time. That's presented some issues in terms of kind of data governance and so on that we've done our best with, and we're tackling that more thoroughly now. And we started having daily stand-ups via Zoom, working together. Naturally, everything was happening at pace. At one point, it felt like we were making 25 decisions a day. about things that were massively important that we would normally spend weeks or if not months discussing. So that made me quite anxious. But the other thing I would say that was really important for the team, and I think partly the reason, David, you're interested in me talking a bit about this, is that we've spent a lot of time in the last couple of years, maybe slightly longer, talking and thinking about our culture and our values as an organisation, and really making sure that that's something that everybody really understands and lives and kind of knows what that is. And our rebrand that we did last year was built on top of that, and that meant that the rebrand was very much owned and understood and kind of embraced by everybody involved. And all of those things have been critical to us to be able to respond in the way that we have. So the flexing that I mentioned about our services, we flexed our existing befriending infrastructure. Normally that is an individual who is assessed by a staff member for their needs and their likes and their wants and their desires and their aspirations. And then there are volunteers who are interviewed and trained and supported. And then those people are put together for hopefully to create friendships. But we realised pretty early on that we would be able to use that infrastructure to match people who needed shopping support with someone who was able to do shopping for them. And that's quite a simple thing in concept, but just to remind you of those numbers of the influx, and that I think in similarly with the kind of charts that you see in terms of infection rates or so on, there was a really steep kind of rise to a real high point, and then a kind of sort of steady decline in terms of referrals. But in terms of the work that we then had to do, we kind of we had to step up and work through it in quite a systematic way. So we didn't just flex our befriending infrastructure to match volunteer shoppers with people who needed help or who needed their electricity key card topping up or their dog walking or whatever, but we also used our social prescribing team. We basically offered the social prescribing team to be part of the community hub, which is the local authorities kind of response for people who have specific needs, particularly urgent food needs, financial needs, people who are shielding and so on. And that was a really brilliant bit of cross-sector collaboration, not just in terms of designing the process, although they obviously designed the CRM and built the CRM, but we had a lot of conversations with them about how it would work. But we used the CRM, we were getting referrals directly and putting data directly into that. So there was this kind of cross-agency data sharing and kind of bit of collaboration going on. We also trained some of the staff, some of the council and other staff who were doing the responses to the community hub using the social prescribing guided conversation approach. And we reworked our systems to kind of cope with the demand of all of this, primarily by separating out the volunteer recruitment from the client assessment. And we used various other methods, like I've mentioned before, like Zoom and Google Docs and Google Forms and so on. And we did get some additional resource for that, but in actual fact, the majority of it was based on boosting capacity of our existing structures. The food response is finished now. The kind of volunteer matching funding has finished now, but we have a kind of residual increase in numbers of people that we are working with on a regular basis of about 150 people, and that's obviously a challenge for the team. Oh, this one seems to be blank. There we go. So I wanted to really quickly show you the training, which this is something that we have always done face-to-face, so training for staff and volunteers, and the volunteer one is a really simple kind of induction, and what it is basically 12 1-minute ish videos that were recorded at home by our staff members. Kind of the key, I'm not going to play all of this to you, but just want to show you. This is our Emily, who is sitting, I think possibly in her bedroom or her living room, doing a really simple kind of, here is the information, the key information you need to know. So we did this in collaboration with Kenio and Storytagger, who are two locally based, but I think national or international organisations, and they helped us. Oops, sorry, that's the wrong one. They helped us get those training videos online, to get the videos made and edited and presented in this way, and then they also helped us do a little quiz to make sure people had understood. And then at that point, people were able to, oh, I'm going the wrong way, were able to download various resources for extra information. What we found at that point was that people felt still that they needed more, and in the face-to-face training there's a lot of conversation and discussion, because obviously things like safeguarding and boundaries are not things that you can just read and go, yes, I know what that means. You have to actually experience that to a certain extent. So as the time went by, we started to set up Zoom group supervisions for small groups of volunteers, particularly newer volunteers who'd had online training rather than face-to-face training. So we were able to explore some of those things with them. And then the work with StoryTagger and Kenio was like, it was totally would not have been possible without them. And that work was pro bono from them. And that was kind of like part of their response to COVID. So that was fantastic. On the comms, I just want to say a little bit about the words and the pictures and the communication, about how we reached out to people. Like that was as much as like how we communicated what we were doing was almost as important as what we were doing in its own right. You know, the way in which we were describing it. We wanted to give confidence to people, even though we didn't know any more than they did. You know, we wanted them to know that whilst we didn't have all the answers, we were asking as many questions as we could, and we were constantly evolving what we were doing. It's quite hard to communicate that to people who you don't have a kind of constant open line of communication with, as a lot of our clients. So we did use as many different channels as we could. So that would be like web, social media, paper letters, email broadcasts to our volunteers, new email newsletters, and so on. And we just kept the messaging really simple and clear. This is actually really tiny, so you maybe can't see it, but you know, it's basically, I need support, I'd like to volunteer, I'd like to donate. You know, those are the three things that we wanted people to do. And if they weren't of interest to people, then that's fine, but we probably aren't for you right now. You know, it's like, this is what we're here for. So that's how we kind of got the message out. I wanted to say a little bit about the imagery that we were using as well, because this is one of our old, in inverted commas, pictures, and this is Layla and Halima, who one of our befriending pairs. Have been in a befriending pair for a number of years, and you can see they've got a real connection. The photo really shows that. But but they're really close together. You know, they're not socially distanced, and they look really happy. And to be honest with you, at the beginning and middle of March, this didn't feel appropriate. We got, eventually, once we'd had a time to take a breath, we got one of the local photography companies, who I think might have also done this pro bono for us. And this kind of image where, you know, you can still see the connection between people, but they're socially distanced. You know, they're having a laugh, but they're taking into account the circumstances. We used a lot more photos that people had taken of themselves doing whatever they were doing for us. You know, this one's actually quite recent, but uses images that people had taken of themselves or that we'd taken on a smartphone. And there's a couple of the volunteer shoppers. This was from Volunteers Week, because we obviously didn't want to miss that. Amy was our super shopping volunteer. She shopped for like 5 or 6 people. It was amazing. And we've done, what we've done recently is, you know, to kind of update that imagery, and we very recently just updated the kind of wording. So this is now the landing page, which is, we don't need quite the same type of urgency in terms of volunteers. We don't need the same kind of volume of volunteers, but we still do need people. But the key point I want to highlight here is, like, you know, this isn't over. And for a lot of our clients, this is in no way over. Many people are still facing huge challenges, and we're there for you. You know, we're here to help. And that's something that I think has tried to guide us the whole way through. I'm going to stop there because I know I'm running out of time, but the things that I haven't even talked about is how the team have managed, how the volunteers, we had some super volunteers who did some very specific tasks for us. We had, I think, 10 senior volunteers who between them gave about 400 or 500 hours in the space of about 3 months. You know, it's just phenomenal. Like, we could not have done it without them. And they really struggled with some of our back end infrastructure stuff. So, and our next steps are very much about how do we go forward. You know, so we're going to kind of review things. We're going to review, refine and consolidate. So keep the things that have worked, improve the things that haven't worked, and let go of the things that don't feel like they belong in the new setup. That's it. Thank you very much, and really happy to talk to anyone in this group or out about what we've done.
There's a couple of quick questions in the chat there for you, Jo. I don't know if you want to address those or if you want to, just at the bottom. Oh, there's a few more actually.
Okay, give me a sec. All right. I'm going to go up from the bottom. How did you help volunteers connect at a distance? Did volunteers find this hard following working more closely? Volunteers, I think, were as keen to keep everybody safe as we were. Where people had started a phone befriending relationship with someone they hadn't physically met, we were doing things like, here are a list of prompt questions, so let's not always talk about COVID, let's talk about the things that give you hope or joy, or things that you want to celebrate in your daily life, however small. So we kind of gave people some hints about those kinds of things, and actually very quickly those relationships develop. Did we rework our donation page? Yeah, we did. We had a Just Giving kind of emergency campaign. I don't know why I gave that scare quotes. It was an emergency campaign. And that was talking about exactly what we're doing and the volume, basically. And that's the thing I think that people related to. One of the things that is of quite a digital point is that the rebrand and all the work we've done on that in the last couple of years, or last year, in fact, it's our rebrand anniversary this weekend, in case you're interested. We did a lot of work since about maybe November last year on the SEO, and where we place in kind of ratings, and what happens if you search for loneliness charity Brighton and Hove, what happens if you search for volunteering Brighton and Hove. And we gotten ourselves into the top 3 of all of those kinds of searches, and I think that really helped people who wanted us to find us, if you see what I mean.
The last one is about volunteering. I think your details presumably are in the chat, so hopefully
they are. Absolutely, yeah.
Yep.
Super happy to talk about any of it. I'm not sure. The CRM stuff, the database stuff, Pauline, maybe we could talk about that separately. It's a bit of a mess, to be honest with you, and possibly not that illuminating for everyone else, but really happy to talk about that.
Jo, thank you so much. That's absolutely brilliant. I know David's probably going to pop in. I just also wanted to say that actually from point of view from Community Works and from the sector, one of the things that Jo hasn't mentioned that she did do, or that TogetherCo did as well, is that they made that training, that online training, free of use to anybody. So any other organisations who were supporting their volunteers or who were engaging with people on online befriending were able to access that training. So really, really phenomenal. And yes, thank you for that.
My absolute pleasure.